Welcome to the Movies of the Damn podcast. My name is Kyle Grant, and I'm sitting here with my friend and published horror author, John Hunt. If you enjoy what you hear here today, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out our Facebook page, and follow us on both Instagram and Twitter, at Damn Movies. Email us any questions, comments, and suggestions to moviesthedamned@gmail.com. For further details on John's published works, please visit his blog, johnhuntfiction.wordpress.com. Today, we'll be discussing Robert Eggers' 2019 film, The Lighthouse. The movie is set in the late 19th century and follows Ephraim and Thomas working at an isolated lighthouse. Ephraim soon begins experiencing dreams and occurrences. And things worsen as they become stranded, and their paranoia grows as they begin drinking more and more. Eventually, it's revealed that Ephraim is actually named Thomas as well, taking the Ephraim identity from a former foreman who died out of his neglect. The movie ends as Ephraim kills Thomas and seemingly dies himself as gulls peck away at his innards. John, opening thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, so I saw this some time ago, like when it was in theaters with Ethan, and we watched it. And for Ethan, this is one of his top films of 2019. Like, it's right up there with him for like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and all the other great films that were in 2019. This is right up there with him.
Really?
For sure. I disagreed. I enjoyed, like, let's be clear here. I thought the directing was amazing. The shot placement, amazing. The mood, everything, amazing. The acting, stunning. Like, absolutely, I was floored by the acting. But my main issue with it was all the odd and strange things that went on in this film. Were they real or not? And I was never satisfied with any type of answer that was given to me from anyone.
Yeah, you know what, John? Like, I didn't see this one in theaters. I did want to go and see it in theaters because it had a bit of hype behind it. Got some great reviews. I absolutely loved The Witch.
So did I.
Robert Eggers' film The Witch was phenomenal, and really there was a lot of similarities between these two pictures, and the fact that they were kind of a little bit different than what we would regularly see. They're both period pieces. In both of these period pieces, the characters spoke as if they were in that period. Kind of dark, brooding, eerie, slower films. But to be honest with you, The Witch, in my opinion, was heads and tails better than this film. And I'm really torn about this one because, as you mentioned, there's a lot of good things about this movie. The acting is phenomenal. It's shot phenomenally. But I don't know if I can give this a thumbs up. I can't see myself ever recommending that someone watch this film.
Really, though? Like, it's that far gone for you that you can't even say to someone, check it out, you might see something I didn't type thing? Or you don't know?
Sorry, say it again?
So I just went, like, like you wouldn't tell any friend of yours, like, this is a different movie, you might enjoy it or anything like that? You just would not tell any of your friends to watch this?
No, I really can't, John, because it's one of those films that after 2 hours, I'm almost more confused than when I started. Because as you said, you don't know what's real, you don't know what's not. It's just very, very strange. At no point was it fun. At no point was it really scary. I just left feeling unsatisfied.
Okay, those are interesting points. I'd have to say the entire time I was watching it, I was entertained. I was interested. I didn't check out my watch. I was very engaged in the film, 100% engaged. But like I said, there's a lot of things, a lot of aspects to this film that weren't explained, and you just never know what happened. You don't know what happened. You're looking at it from one point of view, and like I don't even know like how to compare this. This is almost like a cabin fever film mixed in with ancient Greek mythology, So and even then, you don't even know if it actually took place, right? So, like, I guess we start with like what started off the weirdness for you.
Well, I think right away the first thing that's weird is how it's presented to the viewer. Kind of like in that weird presentation, the weird camera format that they used. And I wouldn't say that that was a bad thing. It took a little bit of time to get used to, but I thought it was just kind of a really narrow vantage point. And then when I did some reading about it afterwards, it was done on purpose. It was done from that narrow vintage aspect ratio to withhold information from the audience, to make it feel like a little bit more claustrophobic for the audience watching it. And so, I'm not saying I didn't like the way it was presenting, but if we're talking about weird things, that would be a weird thing right off the start.
Well, to me, that wasn't too weird. I am older than you, and that's how some movies used to be before there was a letterbox, right? The
Yeah,
letterbox
yeah, yeah.
format. So that's how it cut off half the screen. Like that's just the way it was. So I didn't find that weird in itself. That aspect of it weird in itself. But I wouldn't say the filming was any different than it was in The Witch. And and I love The Witch too. So they're both slow burns. They both had long shots of just focusing on the character. You know what I mean? It was the same style I found. So I didn't really have a problem with the presentation itself. So, but I'll tell you what I did have a problem with, and it's going to take me a while to explain it. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing he finds in the mattress is that porcelain doll or some carved doll.
Yeah, we
Um,
call it like a carving of a mermaid, right?
yes, right. So there is that. He finds that, and in mythology, back in the from the Ulysses and all that stuff, it's the sirens. There's sirens that used to be around rocks. This is like the myth, right? To be around rocks that were in the ocean through it would have been the Mediterranean at that time, but and what they did is they lulled you closer to them with their songs. So they were seductive creatures. So what they were trying to do is to lull you towards the sharp rocks, and your ship would break apart on the sharp rocks, and they would be able to feast on you. And
Oh, wow.
it was all part of this seduction thing, right? Um, so you could see that that's what happening with him when he found that doll. He started to be sexualize a lot of things that was going on in his environment. Now that could be cabin fever and there's no one around, but I think the director drew it from once he found that siren, that all this other stuff started to come from there. So he'd had dreams about a mermaid on the shore, like in the water, and then he had dreams about a mermaid, that he found on the shore, and that it was, all this interesting imagery that they were using, which to me was like, okay, because I read a lot of that weird, not weird, I guess, but I'm into ancient stuff. I'm into history and mythology and stuff, so I knew what it was that part was about,
Yeah.
and so it's all just to show the contrast between being seduced into something that would be harmful to him. So I get that whole progression. I get that, right? And then I was having trouble explaining this to Ethan when we left the theater the last time, but I watched it again. And I because I knew we're talking about the very final scene where the birds are pecking at him.
Yeah, go ahead, but I have some questions about that.
Yeah, so for sure, right? So uh, I knew it was in relation to the Prometheus myth, right?
Yeah.
But I was having a hard time articulating that to Ethan. But because I was like, I don't even know what it was. That movie, the movie was mesmerizing. I really enjoyed watching it, but I did leave unsatisfied as well. So I just had a hard time articulating to Ethan what my issues were. But one of the issues were so the whole Prometheus thing is like, he was I think he was like a demigod. But
Yeah.
anyways, he stole the technology of fire from the gods, who were very jealous of their technology, and he gave it to the mortals. So that's the
Okay.
myth of how mortals got fire. So in retaliation to him stealing their technology, they had him bound, and then a bird would come and eat his liver. And
Oh,
then the bird would be finished with the liver, and then the liver would regenerate, and the bird would go back to eating his liver. So it was perpetual torment, apparently the liver is extremely painful. So that's kind of what they were showing at the end. And throughout the film, you could see how that was building up, right? So the lighthouse represented the fire of the god. William Dafoe, because you see in some pictures, like remember he was beating him up on the ground near the end there before he threw him in the hole. You see he had like a starfish crown and he had tentacles at some point, right?
Okay.
That's representative of Poseidon, which is one of the gods, right? So, and he's beating up this god, and then he goes and takes and steals the lighthouse light, which is representative of the fire, Prometheus fire, right? And then he sees what he sees, and then, that's what happens is he ends up at the bottom there. My main issue with all of that, right, one, is that you don't know if it's real or not. Two, he falls down the lighthouse steps fully clothed, and then the ending scene, he's completely naked and a bird's eating him. So I'm like,
exactly.
How did you get from there to there, right? Where was this?
And that's my question, John. It's like he falls down the lighthouse steps and then he's outside seemingly dying. Like, what happens?
And if you remember, where he was pretty far away from the lighthouse. Like, you don't fall out from the lighthouse door and then keep rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling, and then you end up near the sea.
And John, I can't argue with your comparison between the Greek mythology there, but if someone like me who isn't that much familiar with Greek mythology, how was I supposed to know any of that?
Yeah, I don't know. So I don't know. Like, I think it's more just a symbolism, right? So and a lot of times.
But John, what you're describing makes sense, but you would have to know that Greek mythology to see how things tie in together. Where someone like me who didn't, they're lost.
Well, see, I don't exactly know that. You don't need to know that a female carving mermaid wouldn't be attractive to a lonely man on an island, right? You don't need to know that it's a siren trying to lure them, right? You don't need to know that. And I don't know necessarily. You don't need to know that there's that whole Prometheus tie at the end for them to hate each other because they were in such close proximity. Willem Dafoe was on this guy all the time, and that anger gets built up and explodes at the end, right? So, my only issue, like my main issue, was like I don't necessarily think you need to know about all that mythology or anything like that. But I think you kind of need to know at the end if this was real or not. Like, what did we witness?
Yeah.
Like at some point, like, because then you could take down the whole movie, right? So, okay, so he gets to the island and he goes insane. But did he?
But like, at what point though, right?
Exactly.
Because you don't know what's real and what's not, as you've already said.
Yeah.
Like in his mind, they just missed the rescue ferry or whatever you want to call it. But William Dafoe is like, no, that was supposed to be like 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I know.
You remember that scene, right? Like,
yeah.
Which one was it?
It's lost time, right? Lost time represents supposed to represent degrading sanity, right? So you're going insane type thing. But
yeah.
But I even take it a further step back. I even asked Ethan, like, how do you know he even went to the island if you don't know any of this is real? What do you even know about this character, right? You don't even know. It could have had that mental breakdown after he stole that other man's name after being responsible for his death, and that this whole island was a way for him to escape that. You don't even know that. That's a potential theory. You don't know anything that happened in this movie is real. You don't know.
Maybe the only thing that was true was him dying on the rocks. He slips on the rocks, the seagulls are pecking at him, and he's having this vision about this lighthouse thing.
And even then, like, why is he nude there?
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? So I'm like, that was my issue. It's just like I like ambiguity as much as the next guy, right? But still, if you're gonna have an ambiguous ending, there should be two plausible scenarios that are possible based upon the preceding narration of the entire film, right? But there isn't that. You don't know what happened. You just don't know.
You really don't. And that's why.
I felt like I watched an art house film that was released to the general audience, and it should have been kept in an art house cinema.
That's a great way to describe it. And before this podcast, kind of when I first watched the movie and I texted you, and I'm like, I got to do some reading about this. Mm-hmm. And I think you texted me back and you said something like, well, that's a problem. Like if you have to do reading about what happened in a film, then that's an issue.
Yep.
Though the one theory though I did read, I thought was an interesting one. Have you heard anything about the same person theory?
I haven't read anything about this.
So there was one article that I read where there's a theory going on out there that they were actually the same person,
Hmm.
just in different time periods, and they had lost their mind. So they believed that they were there with someone else when really it was just the same person throughout. And so that was why it was such a big deal that when it was revealed that Robert Pattinson's real name was also Thomas.
Mm.
And another thing that added to that, they said that when Robert Pattinson, remember when he's painting the lighthouse
Yep.
and William Dafoe drops him?
Yep.
I know I'll have to watch this back to verify, but apparently when he hits the ground, you hear the sound of a bone breaking. Now, of course, Robert Pattinson's leg wasn't broken in the movie, but William Dafoe walks with a limp. And so that was to indicate why William Dafoe ends up having a limp eventually. If you're kind of following me there, if they're the
No,
same
I do
person.
follow you, but my whole issue, like, and that's cool. I like, how I like to read up on stuff like that, but it's like it's a theory, right? I don't think
Yeah,
we
and
should. I don't think we should be theorizing about that. I think it should be something that, you know what I mean. Like, you shouldn't have to guess what happened in a movie, right?
no,
Like,
exactly, right? But it's just
yeah.
it's something the same person theory. I would have never in my mind did it even like potentially cross my mind. Oh, this maybe they're the same person. Like it just if I hadn't read that article, it would have never been in my head.
Well, and my only issue with that is that so then once again was that whole were they even at the lighthouse? Because you always have to send two you always have to send two people or something like that. It's just the way it was done. You never send one person to go to a place like that. So like were they even there? You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah,
all like you don't even know. That's my main issue with the whole film. The whole film.
yeah, but and yeah, it did have some issues, but then as I said, very well acted, very well directed, very well shot.
Hmm.
And one thing that it did for me is again, and I've brought this up on previous podcasts, how lucky I feel to live in the year 2020. Like John,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
couldn't imagine living in the 19th century, I think is when this was shot, and being a lighthouse keeper.
Hmm.
Seeing like how they had to live and the work they had to do, and I think they were supposed to be secluded there with only each other for 4 weeks. It's like forget that.
Yeah, they talked about that though. They got paid pretty well for it, right? Uh,
You'd have to pay me a lot to do what they were doing.
no, no, and I agree with you. And you know what? Like I thought like they did a lot of really good things in this film though, right? Like that the noise of the lighthouse horn going every so often, like that stuff just added like new tension dimensions to it, right?
A cool ambiance, right?
Yeah, yeah, like a great ambiance and a great background. They're in the slow descent from drunkenness into all that type of stuff. I really like I said like I know Robert Pattinson from Harry Potter and Twilight, the Twilight movie
Yeah.
series, right? I had no idea he had this in. I'm like, this dude is a major talent. Like I knew Willem Dafoe was great. He's been in or is great. He's been in Platoon and countless other films, different roles, always believable, always does a great job. But I had no idea that this Robert Patterson was such a talent. He blew me away. Like I couldn't believe how well he did his job.
All I can do is echo those thoughts, and the acting was very, very good. And like you said, I can't say I was a huge Robert Pattinson film fan before this film. So I guess if I'm taking one thing away from this is that I'll see one of his movies again in a second, just because of the depth that he brought to this character and just the versatility that I got to see in his acting craft.
For sure. Like, and I saw on one of the streaming services that he's in a film called High Life, and I kind of just want to watch that now. Like, I wouldn't have watched it before, right? I would have
Yeah.
been like, whatever, Robert Pattinson. But now that I've seen him in this movie, I'm like, oh, I should probably watch this, right? Because like, what he did was pretty phenomenal. And he's going to be the new Batman, right?
Yeah, I did know that. My friend told me that. And one interesting thing that I was reading, John, when they were, I guess, in negotiations to
Mm-hmm.
have him in this film, is that he was speaking with Robert Eggers, and after reading the script, and obviously he probably was having the same issues that we are with after having watched the movie. It's like, what's this thing about? He made it quite clear to Robert Eggers that he wanted to make a movie about a man's crumbling mental health, not a magical lighthouse.
Oh, yeah.
So,
So
so you know what
that's
I mean? So there kind
yeah.
of was that ambiguity in the script, and he wanted to make sure that the focus of this movie was going to be on somebody going insane rather than it being like a mystical, magical lighthouse or something like that. And
Well,
I think they pulled that off.
um, definitely yes, but you still don't know. Like, here's the whole thing, right? So you look at the character's education level. Like, he talked about it, right? Where he worked in the
Yeah.
woods and or in the lumber, timber, or whatever. He did all that type of stuff. He didn't sound like very well versed in books and anything like that, and he didn't discuss any of these things. So I wouldn't even like if he was going insane. So then he would have been the one who brought these mythologies with him into his crumbling insanity, but he had no idea that he even knew of these things existed,
Good point.
right? So like he's bringing up this stuff about like I can clearly see it's Prometheus, and I can clearly see the lighthouse. You know what I mean? I can clearly see the siren aspect and the mermaid aspect, but how? From his education level, from what we were presented in the movie, and there's no way for us to know any different. I would say that he wouldn't even have been aware of those things, because that's a form of a classical education, and back in those times, not a lot of people were afforded the privilege of a classical education.
You're right. You're right, and I can't argue with that. And that's a great point.
Yeah.
Um, One thing I wanted to bring up, and again, in just doing some reading about this, a cool thing was, and I didn't realize it until obviously I looked up on it, but Robert's brother Max co-wrote this movie.
Really?
Yeah, and he actually set out to initially write this himself as an attempt to do a contemporary take on Edgar Allan Poe's unfinished short story, The Lighthouse. And
Oh.
and I didn't know this, but if you're an Edgar Allan Poe fan,
Yeah.
this was his last work that he did not live to finish.
Hmm. I
So I
I
thought that was kind of cool. And then it just, I guess it wasn't coming together, and that's when Robert Eggers kind of stepped in to help his brother and to turn the movie into what it became.
mm-hmm. That's interesting. I like the origin. That's like an origin story for these movies. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I always kind of like the story
Yeah.
behind the story. Big something I'm not surprised about, nominated for Best Cinematography at the Oscars.
Yeah, for
Didn't
sure.
win, but I definitely think it was worth the nomination in that category.
Yeah, for
If it
sure.
was nominated for like Best Film or Best Screenplay, I'd be throwing my hands in the air. But Best Cinematography for sure.
Oh, and I wanted to bring up another thing. Now that we're talking about it, do you remember how it was like a big deal for um, Robert Pattinson when he was talking about the seagull and how it was a pain? He was like, "You don't hurt a seabird, right? It's bad luck to hurt a seabird."
Yeah, it's like a dead sailor has taken it over or something like that.
Well, no, it's like, yeah, I think you probably remember the rhyme of the ancient mariner.
No, no
So it's
clue.
it's one of those poems that they taught us in school. Well, they taught me in school, so I can't remember. It had something to do with the albatross. So what
Okay.
happened? What happened was a albatross is a seabird, and it's considered good luck, right? And the wind was blowing, which they talked when after this bird died, after he killed that bird, you notice the wind changed, right? So
Yeah.
the wind was blowing, and then the wind stopped, and the captain thought it was the albatross's fault, and then killed the bird, and then the wind just completely died, and they were stuck out at sea, and all the sailors blamed the captain for cursing him with bad luck, and they hung the dead albatross around the captain's neck to show that he was at fault for their where they were. So I also noted that was another parallel in this film, like when that bird was in that. He was told not to hurt the bird, the seagull, and then the bird got into the well water, and the water became brackish and poisonous, right?
Yeah.
And then he killed the bird, and right after he killed the bird, you saw the weather vane switch the wind, and then that's why the ship wasn't able to come.
Interesting.
So it's like there's so many different things in this symbolism from the sea. You know what I mean?
Oh, there's crazy symbolism, and that
Mm.
scene that you just brought up of him killing the bird, like that was a wacky scene
That was a
when he
wacky
like
scene.
grabs the thing and like repeatedly bludgeons it like
Yeah.
over and over and over and over again, like wild stuff
Well, he's just transferring his anger for Willem Dafoe to the bird.
and frustration,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
No, a lot. There was interesting things like that. The one thing, and we kind of already covered it. We talked a little bit about him painting the lighthouse, but
Mhm.
when he was dangled over the side like that, my first thought is, no way.
I know.
There's no amount of money that you could pay me to do something like that. Like,
Not with that guy
forget.
holding the rope, anyways.
No, exactly right. And then again, great camera shots. Like how it was, even though I didn't understand the ending,
Mhm.
gruesome to see those birds pecking away at his innards. Like, come on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
One other cool thing that I read about this is that they actually built a 70-foot working lighthouse for this movie.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't like they just went and found one. They actually built one, and apparently it worked. Like it could shine light for up to 16 miles.
Hmm.
So just like a lot of interesting tidbits on this. Now,
Yeah.
I do have to say though that when I watch this, and for anyone who hasn't seen it, if you want to check it out for yourself, don't take my word on it. Check it out. It's on Amazon Prime. But my friend and I actually watched this movie, and I wouldn't say that he absolutely loves horror movies like you and I do, but he
Yeah.
always watched them, and he kind of had an interesting reaction to this movie.
Okay.
So something that he said to me is that in his opinion, for a horror movie to be successful, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, it has to be one of two things. It's got to be scary or fun, and this movie was neither. And I kind of mentioned that earlier, and when he said that, I'm like, you're right. This wasn't scary. This wasn't a ton of fun, and I do agree with you, John, that it was interesting, and you're kind of like intrigued, but. I don't necessarily would say that if something's interesting that you're intrigued is not necessarily fun, and I don't think I had fun by the end.
I don't know. I know what you mean, but I also would say that when I'm intrigued and I'm interested, that means I'm curious about it, and I always have fun when I'm trying to figure something out. So you know what I
Okay,
mean?
okay,
It's a secondary step to it, but
yeah,
at the end, like that's what I mean. Like this whole movie was so like everything was so well done, and then the ending, the way it left me, I'm gonna say I was disappointed for sure, totally disappointed because it left more questions than it answered, right? And I think there's a balance there you need to strike, and for me, anyways, and I don't think this made that balance, right? Where it's like you can have questions afterwards, but usually it's about I wonder what that character will do now, or I wonder what will happen
yeah,
with
yeah,
this. You
yeah.
know what I mean? But the substance of the movie was answered during the movie. So you're not left with all these, uh, I would say, large plot holes unanswered.
No, no, you're absolutely right. Tons of unanswered questions, and I think the biggest one that you hit the nail on the head multiple times in this podcast: what actually happened?
Yeah,
We have no idea what
yeah.
happened. And just one other point I want to bring up from my friend Brandon here. He said that this movie is the prime example of a critic's dilemma. And I agree with him because this movie was really well acted,
Hmm.
exceptional dialogue, great cinematography. But does a critic give it the thumbs up? Does a critic recommend it to someone? And Brandon says he wouldn't because he wants those 2 hours of his life back.
Well, I think there's a thing like you have to measure the whole package, right? So
Yeah.
like
And I think he's talking about the big package there. He's
yeah,
talking about the overall, lots of great pieces, but
mhm,
overall, was it great?
yeah.
And I got to agree with them, and I got to say no, John.
No, I wouldn't. This is not a great movie. From all those standpoints, it's not a great movie, but I would tell someone to watch it because it's one of those films where I would say I'm kind of interested to see what you take away from this. You know what I mean? So it's like one of those.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the only reason why I wouldn't tell him, and I would tell him that the director is exceptional. Right? He did a great job with all these other aspects of the film. But I'd want to get your overall feedback on it. Right? But um, I would give this film a thumbs up though, because like I said, I was interested, I was intrigued. I wasn't like in order for me to give a thumbs down, there has to be a lot, like almost no redeeming qualities. Well, not no redeeming qualities, but you know what I mean. Like there has to be some sort of a balance where the redeeming qualities do not outweigh the unredeeming qualities. So I don't think that this is the case in this movie for me.
So, and that's fair, right? We can all have our different opinions, and the critics disagree with both of us.
Yeah.
They overwhelmingly love this movie. It's sitting at nine on not nine, sorry, 90 on Rotten Tomatoes,
Hmm.
and the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is a 72.
Okay.
Now, me personally, I'm not going to recommend this movie.
Yeah.
And if we're using the Rotten Tomatoes cutoff, which is 60 for a thumbs up, 59 for a thumbs down, I'm going to be in the high 50s.
Okay.
So it's not an overwhelming thumbs down, but it's still a thumbs down.
Yeah.
Where are you?
I'm
Are
along
you
with.
with the audience in the 70s? Are you with the critics in the 90s? Are you somewhere else?
I'm closer to the audience.
Okay.
I'm more like they're 72. I'm more like a 70.
Okay, so you're a little bit below them.
Yeah, I'm a little bit below them. Like I said, like I didn't this movie kept my attention the entire time, and I think that's something that I can't disregard, right? And also the other components that went along with it, all the technical aspects were stunning. So it's just like I said, the story is a huge part for me. So that's where it loses all of its marks is
Yeah,
the
of course.
ambiguity, right? So, but like I said, like everything else was done masterfully, and I'm with a 70 for sure.
And it's just interesting that Ethan loved this so much. And again, to each their own, right?
Hmm.
But for him to say that it's on the same lines as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, no way. Like this isn't even close to the best horror movie of 2019. Like, there's no way that it's even in Midsummer's league, to be completely honest.
And I would agree with that. I agree with you there. And me and Ethan talked about it, right? And he had his reasons, and um, he was a film student, so like it could be a lot of good. Like he'll see stuff that maybe we don't see or understand stuff that we don't understand. But I was looking
That's
at it,
fair.
yeah. But I'm also looking at it as what I said earlier, right? If it's for these art house film students, don't really release it to a wide audience, because
Yeah,
like,
and yeah,
or at least say this is like an art film, like like almost like a customer warning, right? If like just for this is the type of film this is. It's not it was advertised as a suspense thriller or whatever you want to call it. It was not advertised as some ambiguous art house film, right? So um, I think there was a little bit of mismatch in the marketing there, but that's not my job there.
no, and it didn't do great at the box office. Like, it did all right. Like, it had a budget of 4 million and brought in 18.
Hmm.
So it made a little bit of a profit, I guess.
Yeah.
And don't take this as if I hate Robert Eggers now. After The Witch, I'm pretty much willing to give any of his films a chance. So I'm looking forward to his next foray into filmmaking.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, he's clearly got skills. He's clearly got talent. He clearly can direct some actors to bring out some really good performances. So I'm gonna absolutely watch whatever he has to come out next.
I got to agree with that. And I also got to think that we're going to get a strongly worded letter from Ethan after this one.
Yeah, maybe.
Anything else to add, buddy?
No, I got nothing.
Well, folks, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out our Facebook page, and follow us on both Twitter and Instagram at Damn Movies. We want to hear what you thought of today's podcast and any suggestions you have, especially in terms of what movies you'd like us to discuss next. Send us an email to moviesofthedamned@gmail.com. Please also check out John's full-length novels. His first two novels, Dollhouse and The Tracker, are Amazon bestsellers. You can also order his novella Balance, his book of short stories, Four Shots of Horror, and his newest novel, Off the Grid, all available right now on Amazon. For further details on John's other published works, please visit his blog, johnhuntfiction.wordpress.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, everyone. Thanks for listening. Stay safe.